made a lot of impulse responses for my cabs over the last year, and with that has come a number of questions and things I wanted to test out. Today, I have the official Nick Leonard Cab Pack number 4 with all new IRs of all my cabs, but I've also gone through and done some testing and rethought some of my methods, seen what works and what doesn't work so well when it comes to capturing and speakers. So if you're making your own IRs or you're just interested in the process, I've got a bunch of things to test out, and I'll show you the audio clips so you can hear the difference for yourself, and hopefully we can all learn something. I know I have, and that's why I've got a whole new pack of IRs for you, because I think I've made some improvements, I've learned some things, and I've done some things I haven't done in the past. So first up, I've got a demo song with my IRs on guitar and bass so you can hear how everything sounds in context. Then I'm going to get into the questions and tests with clips in there. Then we can talk about these IRs and this IR pack, both what I did with the individual mics, and then finally the blends I made and how I go about that a little bit, how I decide which ones to pick, all to give you information you need to make better sounds and better IRs. If you click this, you probably know what an IR is. If you don't, it stands for impulse response, and it's a short little audio clip that contains both the sound or tone of a speaker as well as the response or feel and how that speaker behaves, as well as the mic that was capturing it and the mic position. All of this very important to your sound. It goes in a little clip. You can load it up in an amp sim, on a hardware unit, any number of ways that you can use an IR for recording or even for live use if you want to send your guitars to a PA and you don't want them to sound like fizzy garbage, which is what they will sound like without an IR. An IR is also different from some types of cab emulation, which are just a fixed EQ curve. That does work, but it doesn't capture the response of a speaker. And it's likely that that EQ curve is not going to be as good or as close to the real thing as an IR is. If it's done correctly, an IR sounds essentially identical to how it would sound to record through that cab live in the room. It's far more convenient, and you don't have to worry about things like a mic getting moved during a session or making a lot of noise recording cabs or owning all the cabs you might want to own. You can just buy IRs or get them for free from me on my Discord, link below. I wrote out a beautiful full color manual for these IRs so you can find out more information and pictures of the cabs, the mics, the blends as your handy reference. So anytime you're using these IRs, you can always refer to that, and it looks sweet. So please read it and check it out because it took a few hours to make, and I hope you like it. So let's answer some questions about IR creation. The first thing I wanted to test was the white noise or impulse method versus a sine sweep method. This is a way of creating IRs, and they both have some strengths and weaknesses, I guess. In the past, I've used the white noise method just because it seemed simpler. I knew how to do it, so I used it for all my IRs pretty much up until now. But I wanted a direct test with the same mic position and everything between the white noise or impulse method and a sine sweep. Now, I've heard that sine sweeps are a much better way to capture a loudspeaker, and this white noise method is not so great. But I wanted to see for myself, does it make a big difference? Especially because all the ones I've made up until now are using this white noise method, and if it's not great, then, then I need to re-record everything. Well, spoiler alert, I did, but I probably would have anyways. So here's a direct A/B comparison between these two methods with the exact same mic position. I recorded them back to back, and you can see if you hear a perceptible difference between them. So I do notice with the white noise method, it does sound slightly darker. It seems the sine sweep method captures the high end a little better and a little more faithfully. I will say it's pretty close, and when I heard that this white noise method wasn't good, I thought maybe the sine sweep will be way better, and they're actually pretty similar. However, I would still say use a sine sweep because it does offer some advantages. For one, it's much better at reducing the noise floor and canceling out any possible environmental recording noise. This is because it's captured over a longer time frame. I used a 6-second sine sweep for these, and that means there's more chance to pick up and cancel out that noise as far as I know. I don't know all the technical details, but that's what I've read, and the white noise method is a little riskier for noise. And if you are recording in a noisy environment, that could be worse. I try to keep my room as silent as possible when recording IRs, of course, but there is still some fan noise from both the power amp I use as well as my computer. I just can't do anything about that. So the sine sweep method is better for noise, and it does seem to capture a little more detail. And it really isn't any harder. It is slightly more time consuming. That is really the only advantage to using the white noise, but we're talking about 1 second versus 6 seconds. I think you can take the extra time. It wasn't very long to record all these. I do like deconvolver, and I did use that for most of these because it's a little faster than reverb, but that is built into Reaper, and it can do sine wave deconvolution just the same. So that's another option. It's already free if you're a Reaper user, and there's, I'm sure, some other programs out there that can do IR deconvolution. With the white noise method, you simply record the white noise clip through the speaker and trim the tail and the start of it. You have your IR right there. It's already done. With the sine sweep method, you've got to play through the sine sweep, and that recorded file will then be deconvolved in another program that will do all the legwork for you. And you just process it, and then you have your IR. And I still like to go back and make sure that they are trimmed to the start so that they match up with the phase when I'm blending. Some of them did seem to have different start times for whatever reason, so I do like to manually edit them anyways. So it's a bit more time consuming, but if the results are worth it, I'm happy to put in the work. Next question is, how different is open back versus closed back? And I have a open back 112 Carvin cab, so I made a back panel for it, and I shot some IRs, both open and closed, with the same mic position. And you can hear a big difference in the mids and the bass, which is really what this shows. Let's also compare the difference between the V30 in the 112 and the 412 to see how big of a difference the cabinet and the other speakers in the cabinet have on the tone. Another thing I've heard is that every vintage 30 sounds different. So I wanted to make sure I was miking up the best sounding speaker in this cab. So I went around to all 4 mics, and this also tested another thing, which I had heard from Nolly. He said that miking the angled speakers on the top of a slant 412 is a better sound because there's less phase cancellation because you're dealing with a slant, an angle, instead of parallel walls, parallel baffle on the back, which can cause some phase issues. And indeed it does. So let's listen to each 4 speaker and listen especially in the bottom speakers to that slight phase issue in the bass region. Now, I thought the top left speaker sounded best, and unfortunately, I've always recorded the top right speaker for whatever reason, but my previous IRs from this 412 are using that top right speaker, and the top left one just sounds better. It sounds a little darker, I think, and a little gainier. It's got a fuller mids. It just overall sounds like a nicer speaker to me, and it sounds thicker and better. So this IR set contains IRs from the top left speaker, and I originally made a set from the top right speaker, but they're just not as good, and they're similar, but we might as well have the best speaker. Let's talk about cabs. I've got the Carvin C412T, that's the Steve Vai Legacy cab. This one was made in 2002. They are Celestion Vintage 30s. However, they're made in China, if that makes a difference, but they are also right from the best era of V30s, according to the experts. They're also the 16-ohm version, which some people prefer the 8-ohm version. I don't have an 8-ohm version to test it with, and all speakers evidently sound slightly different, so you can judge for yourself whether or not these are top-tier V30s or not. The cab is also front-loaded, and if we take the Mesa oversized cab as sort of the gold standard for metal 412s, that is a rear-loaded cab, and this is a front-loaded cab, which does impact the tone. The speakers are a little more present and speakery on a front-loaded cab. The rear loading gives a little more depth to the cab resonance, I think. It might be slightly darker. I don't have a rear-loaded cab to compare it to here, so I'm just going off of what other people have said are the differences. But either way, it's a good-sounding cab. It's a pretty popular one, I think. and well regarded. So I like the sound of it. It is a little different from a Mesa Oversized, but people like different things too. So it's a direct, punchy cab. It maybe doesn't have as deep of a bass as it could. Dimension-wise, it's not much smaller than the Mesa Oversized. It's about 2 inches shorter, and the other dimensions are like within a half an inch. So it is almost the same dimensions as the Mesa cab, just 2 inches shorter. I don't know how big of a difference that makes. Maybe some. Next is the VHT 212. This is a Pitbull extension cab, and this was made before the split between Fryette and VHT, so I don't know the exact year, but it's before 2009. It has the Celestion Classic Lead 80s, which have a much bigger cap than the V30s, as well as the Carvin speaker, the Vintage Legacy speaker. They have a similarly big cap. Maybe that is the lead voicing. I've heard that there can be lead and bass versions of speakers. So maybe that is typical of a lead voiced speaker. With a larger cab comes a lower resonant peak in the bass. So where the bass sits, where it's got a big bump at the edge of its frequency range, goes down the bigger the cab is. So you'll get a deeper sound, which is why we usually like 412s. But the 212 is a little tighter sound, and it seems to have a little more presence and aggression in the upper treble and upper mid areas. It's just got a different tone than the V30 412, and I think they sound quite nice blended together. I think they can complement each other, and they're both good sounding cabs. Lastly is my Carvin 112. This is the vintage series 112 they made, and unfortunately Carvin is not making guitar amps or bass amps or cabs or anything, which really bums me out because I have a lot of Carvin gear and I like it. And when they were producing guitar amps and cabs, they were often way cheaper than the competitors because you bought directly from them. They didn't go to retailers. So I really liked that. I have a bass head from them. I have a bass cab, and I've got these 2 guitar cabs, so I like all their stuff, and the price was good. You could buy stuff new for the price of other brands used often. But that's an aside, and this is an open back, vintage voiced cab, which does work really nicely for clean stuff, maybe lighter styles, blues, jazz. Being a 112, and especially with the back open, it doesn't have nearly as much bass, and the open back versus closed back, as you can test out, it does have a big difference, not only on the depth of the bass, but also it changes some of the mid frequencies. And so I do like the open back sound for clean playing, for maybe lighter overdrive tones. You just have to play around with it and see what it works for. It's not going to sound great or good, really, for a metal tone. I also have the closed back version IRs for that, as well as the V30 with the closed back. And those are more suited for metal, but I actually like the sound they have on leads. And I used it for the lead in that demo track, was the closed back Carvin Vintage Legacy speaker for the leads. And I think it works well for leads, and it's a little different from the rhythm guitar. I've wanted to capture my bass cabs for a while, but I don't have them at my house, and I just haven't got around to it. So let's go on over to my man on the scene, Nick, at the rehearsal space, recording bass cabs. I'm coming to you today on location at the old myopic rehearsal room, and sadly, there's no sick jams going on here right now. It's just kind of become a storage space, so there's really not much that you'd want to see unless you like power tools. My guest today is the Tower of Power, the Wall of Thunder, aka my bass cabs. I've got two cabs here. This is a Carvin BRX 10.4. It's a 410 cabinet with some really powerful, I think they're 300 watt drivers. It's a pretty sick cab, and it weighs 96 pounds, and it's a beast to lug around, so I try to avoid it. But it is a great cab, and it has 1,200 watts of power handling and a very broad frequency response. So that's going to be the Primo cab, the best one. And below that, I have a 115. It's just sort of an extra cab, and I use it in conjunction with this bi-amped just to take some of the load off my Carvin so that I don't blow any more speakers, because I have done that in the past. Somehow, I destroyed speakers on a 1,200 watt cab. Don't ask. I don't know. I don't think I did anything crazy, but maybe they just got too hot in here. Anyways, that's loaded with an Eminence. I want to say it's an Eminence Legend 15. I'll put some text on the screen if I misspoke, but I think that's what it is. Not my favorite sounding cab on its own. It's okay. I'm not a huge fan of 15-inch speakers, I think. I prefer the 410 configuration, definitely. It'd be really nice to have a powerful 210, maybe, for gigging. But I usually just like to borrow other people's cabs, like giant Ampeg fridges, which are awesome sounding, but I will never buy one because they're way too big. The mics I record them with are an SM57, like I'm talking into. That is my overall favorite mic. It may just be because I've heard it so much, but it's popular, it's classic for a reason. It just works nicely with the guitar, especially with the Vintage 30. They just seem to be a really good match, and I've listened to plenty of other mic shootouts and tested lots of IRs. I just don't find a mic that I like better than the 57 on its own. However, when I go to blend stuff, I like to add in other mics to fill out the frequency range. Now, the 57 doesn't have a great bass response, and it is a little darker compared to a condenser. Both of those things are generally good on guitar, but they are sort of weak points in the mic, and it is a dynamic mic, so it has a different sound from a condenser. Again, it's one I like. I like dynamic mics usually better on guitar, but they aren't perfect, and they're not quite as accurate to what the speaker really sounds like. They have much more color and character, which is a good thing, but also could be a downside to that mic. To fill in some of those gaps, I have the MXL 990, which I put a Dockman Audio K47 capsule in, and this capsule is more of a vintage voice capsule, which just means it's not quite as bright as some. It's a darker capsule that I think works really well on this, and I did a video shooting it out with my Stellar X2, which has a K67 capsule. And the K67 capsule has more of a 10K bump. The K47 capsule here has more of a 5K bump. So it sits more in the range of the 57, and I think it works a lot better on guitar speakers. It's got more aggression in the right spot to match up with the 57, and it can complement it well, sort of adding some of that high fidelity quality of a condenser with a faster response time and a more open and transparent sound with a similar frequency range to the 57. So you can sort of blend between the character of a dynamic and the character of a condenser in a way that complements each other and are not fighting too much. Lastly, I have the Audix F10. This is a drum mic. It's just a random mic I tried one day, and I don't like it on guitars really because it's very scooped. It's being a drum mic sort of pre-EQ'd for a lot of bass, a lot of treble, not a lot of mids. So not really a great mic for guitars, but I did use it on some of the bass cabs just to use in blends. Because it has that scooped sound, I thought it could be useful on bass cabs, and I hadn't heard it on bass cabs, so I wanted to try it out there. I think it works well enough in a blend. It can help fill out some parts of the frequency spectrum, but I wouldn't use it as a main mic. So I've also made a bunch of mix-ready blends for both guitar and bass of each of these cabs and some combinations of cabs. And my philosophy when blending is to try to find different elements that sit in different places and get them to work nicely together. The only other post-processing I did on these was to filter out at 80 Hertz and 11K. And I did not do the low filter on the bass ones because I'll leave the low end up to you to decide what to do with. But these are just general moves that you'll make on pretty much any IR. And so I wanted to just save you a step and do that. A lot of people filter more aggressively, so I left it a little wide. So you may want to filter it at 100 and 10K or 9K or even down to 7. That's up to you, but I just wanted to give it a push in the right direction out of the gate. For creating the blends, I'm using AIR from Audio Assault, which is a cool tool for blending and manipulating IRs, and then you can export the finished thing. Now, I took the time before this to phase align all these IRs to trim them down to the start so that they all work in phase with each other, so I don't have to mess with the phase in AIR. I can just mess with the mix on them and run it through my filter, and it's pretty simple. My process here was to pick an individual IR that I really liked to be the base of the tone, and I would leave that one just at 50% of the mix, and then pull in maybe another 1 or 2 or 3 that just had some different things to complement it And I would try out different positions on each one, try out different mics on the same position when I found a position I liked, and play around with the blend. Sometimes little moves can make a big difference. I'm not going to make an IR that I don't like, really. So I tried to let them have their own character, but also I have my taste, and so they all sound somewhat similar because of my preferences. So you might recognize the naming conventions here if you're a real gamer, and it might give you some insight into what these blends are. So for all these, I tried to use at least 2 different mics and at least 2 different positions so that we capture a little broader spectrum than an individual IR would give you. Starting with the probe, that is the 112 with a closed back and the Carvin VL12 speaker. The Zealot is the 112 with the V30, and then the Oracle is the 112 open-backed with the Carvin speaker. The Dragoon is the 212, the Void Ray is the 412, and the Carrier is another version of the 412 with some back of the cab IRs blended in too, and a little different mix overall. I did record a few just behind the 412 for fun and for blending purposes, and I used a little bit here, but they don't really work high up in the mix, so I think it was about 10%. The Archon combines 2 beings into one, and the result is power overwhelming. It is the 212 and the 412 combined together. The Mothership combines all of the guitar speakers except for the open-backed 112, but I have the closed-back 112 with both speakers, the 212 and the 412. It surprisingly works. I thought it was just kind of a fun little thing to try out, but it actually sounds pretty great, and so I used it on the main guitar tracks for this demo. For the bass blends, I have the Immortal, which is the 410, the Disruptor, which is the 115, and the Colossus, which is the 410 and the 115 combined. So that wraps up the epic Nick Laird Cab Pack for the ARMADA. I hope you enjoyed this. You can go over to my Discord and download this IR pack, as well as all my previous ones. This one contains mostly the same cabs and better recordings of it, but you should download them all and see what you like. I'm also going to pick up a pretty legendary combo amp tomorrow that I'll leave a surprise, as well as another mic that is well suited for recording it. So I will have more IRs coming soon. But for now, that's what I have for you. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you have fun with the IRs. Use them in a track, post them on my Discord, post it on Bandcamp. They're big money IRs. I guarantee you'll get tons of record sales. it's not an official guarantee. I can't guarantee that. Nobody can. So, anyways, that's this video. Please like and subscribe. Smash like, always. And I'll see you in the next video.